Hello everyone, and today we will be starting with internal structure of the heart. Okay, so last time we had completed the entire part of external structure. I hope you remember the different parts. Okay, because 50% of that same part is going to be repeated again today. Okay, so let us start with internal structure of the heart. Okay, so again the diagram will be more or less same like the external structure, but in this diagram you will have to show the direction of blood flow, and also you will have to show the valves, okay, the tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve. So once again, like last time, what I am going to do is I am going to show the right side of the heart in blue color. Why? Because it is dealing with the deoxygenated blood. So let us draw the right atrium, right, and after that is the right ventricle, and then the left side of the heart which is oxygenated blood, so that is going to be the left atrium, okay, and the left ventricle. Please remember that the heart is slightly tilted towards the left side, okay, so when drawing the diagram make sure that you show that. Now let us draw the walls which are present. So do you remember the names of the walls? We had already done that last time. The wall present between the two atria, it is called as interatrial septum, okay, or interatrial sulci. So this is the wall which is present between the atria, okay. This is the wall which is present between the atrium and the ventricle. Similarly, this is the wall which is present between the left atrium and the left ventricle, and the wall present between the two ventricles, which is over here, that is called as the interventricular wall. Now last time I had told you that you can use any of these three words for writing down the name of the walls. For example, you can use the word sulcus, or you can use the word groove, or you can also use the word septum. Please note that normally when you are explaining the internal structure, what we are going to study right now, then normally this septum word is used. So internal structure के वक्त अगर आपको wall का नाम लिखना है तो septum ही word use करना हो सके तो you can also use these two words, but normally these two words are used in external structure. And when you are explaining the internal structure, we use this word. So if I am talking about this wall and I am explaining the internal structure, then what will this wall be called? It will be called as the interatrial septum. Inter मतलब between, atrial मतलब atria के बीच में. Similarly, if I am talking about the internal structure and I want to write the name of these walls, they will be what? Atrioventricular septum. Is this clear? And if I am talking about this wall, it will be interventricular septum. So very simple. Internal structure है तो use the word septum. External structure है तो use any of these two words. Alright, so that is about the walls. Now when you are describing the internal structure, first of all you have to describe again all the chambers of the heart, okay. So you have to describe both the atria and you have to describe both the ventricles. Now this is your right atrium, this is your right ventricle, correct, and this is your left atrium, this is your left ventricle. Please don't make the mistake of writing this side as left and this side as right. याद रखना है, in all the chapters of anatomy this is left, because the person जो आपके सामने खड़ा है उसके लिए ये left side है और ये right है. Okay, so now how do we start with the internal structure? First we will explain both the structures of the atria. So what do we have to explain? First of all, we have to explain whether the atrium is a superior or inferior structure. Same as in external structure. So atria कहाँ पे है? ऊपर है. So atria are both superior structures, whereas ventricles are both inferior structure. नीचे के साइड पे. Second, you have to also mention कि atria जो है वो thin walled है या thick walled है. What do you mean by thin and thick walled? Simple. ज़्यादा muscular है तो thick है. If it is less muscular, it is thin. So while describing these two atria, your first point should always be that atria are superior thin-walled structures. Is this clear? Similarly, you also have to explain that these are the two receiving chambers of the heart. Receiving chambers matlab kya? First, the blood is going to enter into the atrium. If it is coming on the right side, it is going to enter the right atrium. If it is going to enter the left side, left atrium. Ventricle में नहीं enter करने वाला है. So the second point will always be that atria are the receiving chambers of the heart because they receive the blood first. Is this clear? So now you have finished with the description of the atria. Now again, like the external structure, you have to explain which vessels are connected. Now first of all, let us start with this right atrium. Which vessels are connected to the right atrium? Do you remember? We have already studied this in the last lecture. So the most important vessels are the superior and the inferior vena cava. So let me draw them. Superior, inferior vena cava are the vessels which bring deoxygenated blood from all the parts of the body. Correct? So this is your superior vena cava and this is your inferior vena cava. Correct? Now, there is a separate name for both these veins. Superior vena cava is also called as precaval. Okay? Pre मतलब जो पहले आता है. And inferior vena cava is called as postcaval. See, I am using these words because in your textbook, in the internal structure, they have written precaval and postcaval. So you can use any word. If you want to write about this vein, you can write superior vena cava or you can write down precaval. Similarly, here you can use any of the words. Just remember कि multiple words है एक ही part के लिए. Now, so these are two of the veins. Which other vessel is attached to the right atrium? Do you remember I had told you that coronary sinus is there? What is coronary sinus? Coronary means anything related to the heart. And sinus is what? All the coronary veins combined together. Okay? If these are all the coronary veins, then this entire bunch is called as coronary sinus. It is present on the back side of the heart. This is the front view. If I rotate this heart by 180 degrees, then आपको ये sinus दिखेगा. So coronary sinus is also opening into the right atrium क्योंकि coronary sinus के अंदर से deoxygenated blood is passing. So heart का जो deoxygenated blood है, that is passing through the sinus and it is opening into the right atrium. So see, if you want, this is the opening of the superior vena cava. And this is the opening of the inferior vena cava. Is this clear? And obviously the coronary sinuses will also open. So blood flow to the right atrium is clear. Same thing you have to explain, just explain the direction of the blood flow. Now, this inferior vena cava, if you remember I had told you this, that since it is flowing against the gravity, that is why there is a valve present over here. And this valve is called as, this valve in the postcaval or the inferior vena cava, it is called as the eustachian valve. If you are studying this for the first time, you will think that there are a lot of words to remember, but when you read it twice or thrice, you will be able to remember these words. So eustachian valve is the valve present in this vessel. Will this blood vessel have a valve? No, because it is flowing along the gravity. So there is no need of a valve. Obviously the blood will flow downwards only. So here a valve is not present. Now, the coronary sinuses which are passing from behind this heart, they also have valves. And the valves present in the coronary sinus, they are called as Sebacean valve. So one extra word to remember. Alright, see, in today's lecture we are going to learn about many valves, tricuspid, bicuspid, you already know. So please remember this. पोस्ट कैवल के अंदर जो वाल्व है या इंफीरियर वीना कावा के अंदर वाल्व है उसको हम लोग क्या बोलते हैं, यूस्टेशन. एंड द वाल्व व्हिच इज प्रेजेंट इन द कोरोनरी वेन्स, दैट वाल्व इज कॉल्ड एज सेबेस्टियन वाल्व. इज दिस क्लियर? नाउ लेट अस मूव टू द लेफ्ट एट्रियम. Left atrium is very simple. Why? Because only 4 blood vessels enter. You know about that. Which ones are those? They are your pulmonary veins. So 2 pulmonary veins will enter from this side. These are the openings. And 2 pulmonary veins will enter from the right side. They will pass from the back side of the heart and they will open into the left atrium. So the vena cavas will come from here. Is this clear? I am not showing it over here. Already मैंने इधर labelings किए हुए हैं, so you know that. So यहाँ से आपके pulmonary veins जाएंगे. Is this clear? So we have finished with atria. So first of all, we have to explain the atria structure. See, you can explain atrium ventricle. That is also okay, but then you will get confused. For external structure, I had explained all the different parts because that is more easy to remember. Here, if you explain both the atria together, it will be easier. Both the ventricles together, it will be easier. Now, there is another specialized part which is present in this wall. This interatrial septum has a specialized area, but I will teach you that when we end with this internal structure. Okay? So please remember that there is one more part over here, but I will teach you at the end. Now, coming to the ventricles. So when you describe the ventricles, your first sentence will be what? These are thick-walled inferior chambers. Atria are thin-walled superior chambers. Then ventricles को blood कहाँ से मिलेगा? So ventricles receive blood from the respective atria. Right atria will give blood to the right ventricle. Left ventricle will get blood from the left atrium. Simple? Clear? Very important to mention the valves. Okay, so the valve present between the right atrium and the right ventricle over here. What is the name of the valve? You already know it. It is called as the tricuspid valve. Similarly, the valve which is present between the left atrium and the left ventricle, it is called as the mitral valve, correct? Or it is also called as the bicuspid valve. Okay, cusps are basically rounded structures. Tricuspid valve में 3 rounded structure है इसलिए tri. Bicuspid valve के अंदर 2 rounded structures है इसलिए bicuspid. Is this clear? Now, this opening which is formed when the valves are open, this space through which the blood will flow, this opening is also called as aperture. Okay, aperture का meaning है opening. So this opening which is formed through which the blood will flow from the atria to the ventricle, similarly over here, this aperture is called as, what do you think it will be called? It will be called as Atrioventricular Aperture. Simple. Atria और ventricle के बीच में opening आ रहा है, तो उसको आप क्या बोलोगे? Atrioventricular Aperture. Aperture is the opening, correct? Similarly, here the atrioventricular aperture is present. Okay? Now, let us move downwards. Now, both the ventricles, if you compare them, then the left ventricle is 3 times more muscular than the right ventricle. Why? Because the left ventricle is going to pump oxygenated blood to all the parts of the body. See, the right ventricle is going to pump blood to the lungs, but the left ventricle has to pump blood to your brain, to your stomach, to your kidney, all the parts. This left ventricle is pumping, so that is why this is much more muscular, in fact 3 times more muscular, and that is why this left ventricle is also bigger in size. But because the heart is slightly tilted, in this diagram you will see that the right ventricle is appearing larger, but that is not the case. Actual में left ventricle ज़्यादा बड़ा है. Okay. Now coming to the surface, if you see the surface, then this surface of the ventricles, so this is the cut section of the heart because we are studying internal structure. Then this surface, if you see, it is an irregular surface. It is not a smooth surface. It is very, very rough. For example, smooth surface, if I show you, it is a linear surface. A rough surface has got bumps. So the surface of the ventricles, it is like this, it's a bumps. And that is why this surface, in biology normally जब ऐसे bumps आते हैं तो ये structure को बोलते हैं trabeculae. I will write down the word Trabeculae. Trabeculae मतलब ऐसे जो bumps आते हैं उसको बोलते हैं trabeculae. So this entire surface, internal surface of the ventricle, so ये right ventricle का है, this is left ventricle. Both the ventricles have this rough surface, and that is why the inner surface of both the ventricles is called as. So again, so all these words you have to remember. If the question is asked in board exams, you have to write down all these words. So it will take some practice for you to remember, but it is not impossible. Okay, now this surface is called as trabeculae carnae, C-A-R-N-A-E. That is this rough surface. Atria के अंदर ऐसा कुछ rough surface नहीं है, so we are not going to label it. Is this clear? This surface and this surface is called trabeculae carnae, or it is called as columnae carnae. Columnae because columns are formed. ये जो rough surface है ना, उसके वजह से ऐसे columns form होते हैं. For example, over here such structures will be formed. These are columns, so that is why it is also called as columnae carnae. Similarly, over here columns will be formed, so it will be called columnae carnae. Is this clear? So just revising what we have learned up till now. In the atria, you knew everything. Just the only thing is you had to learn about the Thebesian valve. Thebesian valve is the valve of coronary sinus. Similarly, inferior vena ka valve, Eustachian valve, correct? Also remember the separate names for both these veins, precaval, postcaval. Okay. Then coming to the ventricles, we studied about the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve. You know about that already. This aperture, atrioventricular aperture, and now we did this surface, inner surface, which is trabeculae carnae, columnae carnae. Now, what happens when the blood is flowing from the atria into the ventricle on both the sides? These valves are opened, and because of the opening of the valve, this aperture is created, correct? And through this aperture, the blood is going to flow in the downward direction. Now, who is actually pulling the valve? Because if you see the valve, so if I show you the valves which are closed, the closed valves will be like this. Okay. And when the valves open, they are pulled downwards, and because of the downward pull, the valves actually bend, and that is why this aperture is created. So who is pulling these valves downwards? So there are elastic fibers present in the heart. The ventricles have got elastic fibers. Okay, so if I want to show over here, there will be elastic fibers over here. Similarly, there will be elastic fibers over here. These elastic fibers pull the valves downwards, so ये aperture generate होगा. Once again, when all the blood has flown through, these fibers now relax, so ये वापस valve बंद हो जाएगा. Are you getting this point? Similarly, over here in the left ventricle, these elastic fibers will be present. They will pull the valve downwards so that the aperture is created. So these valves will be shown over here. These valves will be shown over here. Sorry, these fibers will be shown. But ये fibers को कौन खींच रहा है? So there is a muscle which is present. So just see this diagram. You have to draw a very simple diagram. Your book has got a very complicated 3D diagram. You don't need to draw that. उसके marks नहीं है. Marks आपके labeling के. So these structures which you see, these muscles, okay, I will shade the area if you want. These muscles are called as papillary muscles. Now coming over here. So now just pay attention. Papillary muscles, these elastic fibers and the valve. What will be the mechanism when the blood wants to flow from the right atrium to the right ventricle? Okay, so what will happen is these papillary muscles will contract. So when the muscles contract, what will happen is their length will shorten. So when the length will shorten, obviously this will go like this, will become shorter. So it will pull the elastic fibers. So if the elastic fibers get pulled, what will happen is the valves will open. Similarly, now when all the blood has gone over here and when this chamber is going to pump, so now you need to close this because otherwise blood will again go back. So now when you want to close the valves, what will happen? Again these muscles will relax, papillary muscle. Papillary muscles will relax, so their length will increase. So again these elastic fibers will relax and these valves will close. So I am showing this in dotted. Are you getting my point? So papillary muscles basically control the opening and closing of the valve along with these elastic fibers. Now we have to know the name of these fibers. These elastic fibers are called as chordae, tendinae. So I am going to label it on this side. See, whatever these structures are present, they are present in both the ventricles. So this structure is called as chordae, tendinae. Is this clear? So see, you have a lot of words to remember. Okay, so you have to remember this trabeculae carnae or columnae carnae. What are these? This is basically the rough surface of the inner part of the ventricle. So your inner surface of the ventricle is rough. That is called as trabeculae carnae, columnae carnae. Then on the muscles of the ventricles, which muscles are present? So on the regular myocardium, see these muscles which contract, which help in the beating of the heart, they are the myocardium, right? So on the myocardium, these specialized muscles which are present, they are called as papillary muscles. To the papillary muscles are attached the elastic fibers called chordae tendinae, and chordae tendinae are attached to the tricuspid valve or the bicuspid valve. I have already told you the mechanism, it is not explained in your book, so don't write it down if it is asked in the exam. I just explain this to you so that you will understand, or it will become easier for you to remember the words. Is this clear? Okay, done. Now we have to explain the blood supply to both the ventricles, since we had done that over here also. Right ventricle, which vessel is attached? Very simple, the pulmonary trunk is attached. Alright, so the pulmonary trunk will obviously take the deoxygenated blood to the lungs via the pulmonary artery. So the pulmonary trunk again divides into the left pulmonary artery and the right pulmonary artery. You already know this. Similarly, the blood supply connected to the left ventricle, that is done by the aorta. So aorta is the largest artery in the body. We have already studied aorta in the last lecture. So aorta is present over here, correct? I should have used the red color, but that's okay. So, extremely sorry. I thought I used the red pen. So then aorta from the left ventricle, correct? The structure of aorta you already know. There are three arteries which come out from the aorta. Correct? There are three parts of the aorta. So aorta is the blood vessel which is taking oxygenated blood from the left ventricle. Also remember, the aorta has branches called as coronary arteries, right? And coronary arteries supply oxygenated blood to the ventricles. Is this clear? So we have completed with the internal structure of the atria and the ventricles. Just the one last part which is remaining, and for that I am going to rub this pulmonary trunk, because this area which is present, okay, this interatrial septum which is present, on this interatrial septum there is a structure over here. Okay, this oval shaped structure which is present. So in a child which is born, this structure which is present, this structure is called as fossa ovalis. Okay, this structure is called as fossa ovalis. Fossa ovalis is a remnant. Now do you remember we had studied about some other part which was also a remnant? That remnant was basically connecting the pulmonary trunk with the aorta. Do you remember ligamentum arteriosum? Similarly, this fossa ovalis is also a remnant. I will explain to you what the function is. So what this fossa ovalis is, basically in the fetus which is not born, this interatrial septum has this opening. जो fetus born नहीं हुआ है, जब यूट्रस के अंदर है, तब ये इंटरएट्रियल सेप्टम में ना इधर एक गैप है ऐसे. आप समझ रहे हो, ये पूरा वॉल कंप्लीट नहीं है. एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट द ब्लड कैन ऑल्सो फ्लो फ्रॉम राइट एट्रियम टू लेफ्ट एट्रियम. ये किसके अंदर है? अनबॉर्न फीटस के अंदर. बट वंस द फीटस इज बॉर्न, सिंस द लंग्स ऑफ द न्यूबॉर्न चाइल्ड आर फंक्शनिंग, व्हाट हैपेंस इज वो जो कैविटी है वो सील हो जाता है. ओके, सो दिस एंटायर कैविटी गेट्स सील्ड, बट यू कैन स्टिल मेक आउट कि एक टाइम पे वो कैविटी था. So that is why it is called as a remnant. That opening is now sealed, just like that ligamentum arteriosum, which was earlier ductus arteriosus, it is now sealed. Similarly, fossa ovalis is sealed, and in a newborn child, the blood cannot flow from here to here. But this was earlier called as foramen ovale. Okay, F-O-R-A-M-E-N-O-V-A-L-E. Foramen ovale is present in fetus. It is the opening between the right atrium and the left atrium present in the interatrial septum. So the original part is called foramen ovale. After the child is born, that gap gets sealed, but still that remnant which is there, it is called as fossa ovalis. Now, in your book, they have written foramen ovale as foramen ovalis, which is wrong. I have already told you about that correction. The other correction in your book is, over here they have written the name of the vessel as pulmonary aorta. There is nothing as pulmonary aorta. This is the pulmonary trunk. Aorta can be called as systemic aorta. That is a different thing. With this, we complete the internal structure of the heart. Lot of parts to remember. Let us just revise it quickly. So first, in the internal structure, you have to explain both the atria. How will you start? These are superior thin wall chambers, correct? Next, you are going to label the walls. So this wall is called as interatrial septum, or it is also called as interauricular septum, because atrium is also called as auricle. You know this. Then you have to explain the blood vessels. Which blood vessels are attached to the right atrium? The precaval, the postcaval, superior vena cava, inferior vena cava. Also, the coronary sinus, coronary veins open. Whenever you use the words inferior vena cava and coronary sinus, please remember they have valves. The valve in the postcaval is called as eustachian valve. The valves in the coronary sinus passing on the dorsal surface of the heart, those valves are called as Thebesian valve. Done? Then we come to the supply to the left atrium, 4 pulmonary veins. By the way, pulmonary veins do not have any valves. Okay, no valves present in the pulmonary vein. Next, coming to the aperture which is over here, this opening, when it is created due to the opening of the respective valves, it is called as Atrioventricular Aperture. Okay. Now, tricuspid valve is present where? On the right atrioventricular aperture. The bicuspid or the mitral valve is present on the left atrioventricular aperture. Is this clear? Next, bicuspid is also called as a mitral valve. Now we have to explain the ventricles. Now, many words to remember. First of all, the left atrium is 3 times more muscular, much larger, because it has to pump oxygenated blood to all the parts of the body. Now, this inner surface of the ventricles, it is slightly rough. It is called as columnae carnae or trabeculae carnae. Correct? The words I have written over here. It will take some practice for you to remember these words. Now, these valves are opened because of contraction of muscles called papillary muscles. Similarly, when papillary muscles contract, they will pull the elastic fibers which are attached to the valve. These fibers are called as chordae tendinae. Okay, where have I written that? Over here. Similarly, chordae tendinae, these are the chordae tendinae of right ventricle. And chordae tendinae, when they pull the valves, the aperture will be created, blood will flow. Similarly, when all the blood has gone over here, these muscles, papillary muscles will relax, elastic fibers will relax, the valves will be closed. That is it. So I hope this mechanism is clear. Okay. Now the last thing that I need to teach you is that both these vessels, the major blood vessels, the pulmonary trunk and the aorta, both of these have valves. So I will have to show a valve over here. So if this is your pulmonary trunk, then there is a valve over here. Similarly, the aorta also has a valve. So it is over here. And both these valves are called as semi-lunar valves. Now I don't have much space over here for labeling. So I will just put an arrow over here. Semi-lunar valves. So these valves are called as semi-lunar valves because the appearance is like that of a half moon. Okay, semi-lunar is half moon. So if I ask you how many valves have we studied today, then the first valve was the eustachian valve in the post cavern of the inferior vena cava. Second valve that we studied was in the coronary sinus, coronary veins, called Thebesian valve. Then the tricuspid valve, bicuspid valve or mitral valve, 4 valves. Then 2 valves, this semilunar, so how many valves? 6 valves. There are no valves present in the superior vena cava and there are no valves present in the pulmonary veins. Is this clear? With that, friends, we have completed the entire internal structure of the heart. Please pay attention to these words. Eustachian valve, okay, then fossa ovalis, which is a remnant of the foramen ovale in fetus, then Thebesian valve, then chordae tendinae, then trabeculae carnae, then papillary muscles. Oh, I haven't labeled papillary muscles. These are your papillary muscles. Is this clear? So your regular muscles of the heart are not called papillary muscles. These muscles are additional specialized muscles just to open the valve. Is this clear? So with that we have completed the internal structure of the heart. Very important part we have completed. So external structure completed, internal structure completed. So I hope this is clear. If you want, take a 2 minutes break, pause the video because we are going to start with the next part, which is called as the pumping of the heart. Okay, so if you want, take a break. So alright guys, now we have completed the structure of the heart. Now we have to study about the pumping mechanism or pumping of the heart. Okay, not the mechanism. The next part in your textbook is called as pumping of the heart. So let me rub this off. So there are not many changes in the diagram whenever you are drawing the external and the internal structure because you are drawing a simple diagram. You are not drawing a 3D diagram. The only changes that you have to show are that you have to show the tricuspid and the bicuspid valves, and you also have to show papillary muscles, chordae tendinae, alright. And when you are talking about the internal structure, you have to mention all the valves. External structure, mein don't mention any valve. Clear? Okay. So now let us start with the next part, which is pumping of the heart. Alright. Now, heart is the principal or the main pumping organ of the body, right? So it is pumping oxygenated blood to all the parts of the body. The oxygenated blood is coming from the lungs. So the heart has got a very powerful organ. Okay, it has got a very powerful part which is called as the left ventricle. And this left ventricle can pump very powerfully and send the oxygenated blood to all the parts of the body, right? So this heart, whenever the contraction occurs, okay, whenever we say that the heart is contracting, or rather let us say any part is contracting, generally when we say that the heart is contracting, what we mean is that the left ventricle is contracting. When the left ventricle is contracting, that means the blood is going through the aorta and to all the parts of the body. So that contraction is normally called as systole. Now, from now on, you will not be using the word contraction, use the word systole. So, systole means contraction. Similarly, once the blood goes through the aorta, now the job of the left ventricle is done. So, then it will again relax. Relaxation of the ventricle or any part of the heart is called as diastole. Is this clear? So whenever you are writing the answer related to functioning of the heart, please use the word systole and diastole. Systole means contraction. Any part, if it is contracting, whether both the atria are contracting or both the ventricles are contracting, you have to use the word systole. So atrial contraction I will write as atrial systole. Ventricular contraction, when both the ventricles contract, I will write it as ventricular systole. When all the chambers relax, I will call it as diastole. We will study how that mechanism is there, but as of now, please remember, contraction is systole and relaxation is diastole. Is this clear? Now, how many times does the heart beat? So, what is one heartbeat? What is one heartbeat made up of? So one heartbeat is made up of both these things. Heartbeat has got contraction also, relaxation also. So I will tell you what. First contraction, so just imagine your atria getting filled. Your right atrium is getting filled with deoxygenated blood from both the vena cava and the coronary sinus. Your left atrium is getting filled from blood coming from the pulmonary veins. Once your atria are filled, both the atria will contract, the blood will go into the ventricles. So that contraction is called atrial systole, first contraction. Then your ventricles will get filled, both the valves, tricuspid, bicuspid will close, ventricles will contract, that is called as ventricular systole. So two contractions are happening. Now when both the ventricles contract, from the right ventricle, blood will go into the lungs. From the left ventricle, blood is going into the body. So for that temporary part, your entire heart is empty. Because blood from the atrium has gone into the ventricles, from the ventricles it has gone outside. So now none of the parts are contracting, and after both the contractions, there is one joint relaxation which is called joint diastole. We will be learning this later on. So all this contraction and relaxation is called as one heartbeat. So one heartbeat will have two contractions, one relaxation, contraction of atria, contraction of ventricles, and joint relaxation of all the parts. That is your one heartbeat. Just imagine how fast it is occurring. Now, how many heartbeats are present in a normal person per minute? So a normal or a healthy person will show approximately 70 to 72 beats per minute. That means that this cycle of contraction and relaxation will occur 70 to 72 times in 1 minute, and this is called as the heart rate. Okay. Same thing when you measure by putting your index finger over here, it is called as the pulse rate. Heart rate and pulse rate is the same thing. Pulse rate means how much blood is flowing through your radial artery. It is the same thing. Okay, so the heart rate is 70 to 72 beats per minute in a normal person. Okay, later on I will have to teach you that when the beats per minute are much higher, there is a condition which is called tachycardia. When the beats per minute are much lower, then it is called bradycardia. I will teach you that later on. But right now, have you understood what is heart rate? Okay, so the normal heart rate is 70 to 72 beats per minute. Now, in one beat, the left ventricle, okay, the left ventricle pumps approximately 70 ml of blood. Okay, एक heartbeat के अंदर आपका लेफ्ट वेंट्रिकल कितना ब्लड पंप कर रहा है? 70 ml. Why am I considering only the left ventricle? Because जो ब्लड आ रहा है लेफ्ट वेंट्रिकल में वो कहां से आ रहा है? लेफ्ट एट्रियम. Where is that coming from? Right ventricle. Where is that coming from? Left atrium. So that blood which the left ventricle pumps in one heartbeat, not in 1 minute. वन हार्ट बीट में जितना ब्लड पंप करता है वो है 70 ml. Now if I want to find out the total volume of blood pumped by the left ventricle in 1 minute, how will you calculate that? Very simple. 70 multiplied by, just imagine if the heart rate is 72, then the total volume of blood in 1 minute pumped by the heart or the left ventricle will be 70 into 72, which is approximately 5040 milliliters or 5 liters. So in 1 minute your heart is pumping 5 liters of oxygenated blood to the body. Just imagine. Okay, now this is called as heart rate. This volume of blood pumped by either the left ventricle or the right ventricle, because the same blood from the right ventricle is going to the lungs, it is going to enter the left atrium and enter the left ventricle. So the volume of blood in both the ventricles will be the same only, and that volume is 70 ml, which is pumped from the left ventricle in 1 beat. This volume is called as stroke volume. Okay, so these terms can come for definitions. They can ask you define stroke volume. Stroke volume is the total volume of blood pumped by either of the ventricles in one heartbeat. Normally we take the left ventricle into account, that is 70 ml. This volume of blood pumped by the heart or pumped by the left ventricle in 1 minute, which is approximately 5 liters, this is called as cardiac output. This volume of blood is called cardiac output. So see, there are two different terminologies. आप समझ रहे हो क्या? So ये जो part है ना pumping of the heart, that is just to get you acquainted with different words. For example, systole क्या है, diastole क्या है. Okay, what is stroke volume? 1 beat में जितना blood heart pump कर रहा है उसको बोलते हैं stroke volume. 1 मिनट में जितना ब्लड पंप करता है हार्ट उसको बोलते हैं कार्डियक आउटपुट. कैलकुलेशन सिंपल है. इफ 1 बीट में 70 ml है तो 72 बीट्स में कितने और 1 मिनट में कितने बीट्स है? 72. इफ आई से दैट द हार्ट रेट ऑफ अ पर्सन इज 80 बीट्स पर मिनट, ओके, calculate the cardiac output. What will be the cardiac output? You will multiply 80 with 70, which will be 5600, 5.6 liters. Simple. Got it? Again, obviously it will depend on the ventricle volume also. अगर थोड़ा सा बड़ा हार्ट है तो ज्यादा ब्लड होगा, but considering this as constant and changing this, you can calculate. So we have finished with pumping of the heart. Okay. Now, so I was going to start with the next part in your book, which is called as conducting system of the heart. But I think I will make a separate lecture on that, because you will be already getting confused, you will be getting bored because of all these words which have come in this lecture. So next lecture will be conducting system of the heart, where we will be learning about the conducting tissues, okay, sinoatrial node, atrioventricular node, all those things. So today's lecture, I hope it is clear. Internal structure of the heart and pumping of the heart. If you guys have any difficulties, please leave down comments, or you can also contact me. Okay, so that's the end of this lecture, and thanks a lot for attending. Okay, thank you.